If you're following that read through the Bible in a year chart that I gave you at the beginning of the year, you would have just finished the book of Proverbs. So we're in this series, it's kind of been parallel, and so now we've kind of caught up to where we are in our Bible reading. And so Proverbs chapter 1. You want to make sure that you keep your Bible out and handy and ready to go, because I'll just warn you, there's a lot of verses we're going to be looking at tonight, and it's just part of the overview process. We've got to go back and forth, but it's all going to be contained basically in the book of Proverbs. So, book of Proverbs, chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother, for they shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head, and chains about thy neck." If we were to describe the theme of the book of Proverbs in one word, what would that one word be? Wisdom. It is a book primarily about wisdom. These are the verse 5, or rather verse 4, to give subtlety to the simple, the young man knowledge and discretion, a wise man, verse 6 is what I was looking for, to understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise. That's what these are. They are the words of the wise. Well, what makes Solomon this authority on wisdom? Well, for that, you would have to go back to 1 Kings chapter 3. We don't have to turn there tonight because we're going to have enough to study out in the book of Proverbs. But in 1 Kings chapter 3, young Solomon has come to the throne of Israel, and he is overwhelmed by the task, as you would imagine a young man would be. And so God comes to him. He is pleasing unto God. He has done his utmost to sacrifice to God, to put God first in his reign. And God comes to Solomon and says, "Ask what I shall give thee." Quite an offer. And Solomon says, "I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or to come in. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people." And of course, God was very pleased with that request, and he said, "Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall arise any like unto thee." So when we're looking at the words of Solomon in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon, the next few books here written primarily by Solomon, when we study the wisdom of Solomon, we're not just looking at the words of a man who had learned a lot. We're talking about the wisdom of God here. That God took his wisdom, not his omniscience, not his knowing of everything, but his wisdom for life. And he plugged it into this man named Solomon and gave him a wise and understanding heart to the point where he said, "There's nobody else before you or after you that shares the wisdom that I have given to you." And so, short of the Lord Jesus Christ himself, nobody that has ever walked this earth was wiser than King Solomon. So you're entering into, he's one of those guys you would want to rub shoulders with, if you could. Has there ever been a person like that where you just wanted to glean from them? Where you just said, man, this person just knows their stuff and they know about life and they're just they're wise beyond their years. All right, that was Solomon. And what we can get in these books like Proverbs is we get to rub shoulders and pick the brain of the wisest man who has ever lived. It's a man who was gifted by God not just with great intelligence, although he had that, but with God's wisdom. And what I love about wisdom is that it doesn't ever have to mask itself in big sounding intellectual words. Wisdom isn't like that. Wisdom is far closer related to common sense than it is to intellectualism. Now, you've been around those people before, haven't you? An intellectual, which there's nothing wrong with being intellectual or being smart or being well educated, but sometimes you get around somebody that's so smart, it's like they don't even know what they're talking about, or I don't know what they're talking about. They're just spinning circles, and they're so smart they just don't even hardly know how to function in society. That's not wisdom. Wisdom is down to earth. The wise Proverbs, when you think about this, perhaps the greatest mind that has ever lived never had to get beyond just a simple thought. It was just right there on the bottom shelf. It was just accessible to anyone. And these Proverbs, they are extremely simple, and yet as soon as you scratch the surface, you realize, wow, there's depth to this too. It's very profound, and you can reach them, but the truths are deep, and they're short. They're heavy on imagery. That's Hebrew poetry for you. Proverbs is one of those books where you can just quickly memorize one, and it sticks in your mind, and you can see it almost. Listen to this one. Proverbs 11:22. It says, "As a jewel of gold in a swine's snout, so is a fair woman which is without discretion." That's one of those things that just conjures an image in the mind. A fair woman without discretion, he said, it's like a gold ring in the snout. 26:14 says, "As the door turneth upon the hinges, so doth the slothful upon his bed." Just that imagery that's there. And so the wisdom that is in Proverbs is incredibly practical. It's not one of those things where it's just, neat little sayings here and there. No, it will impact your life. And I mean, somebody like Solomon, he was so brilliant, he could have made your head spin with his understanding. But the goal of wisdom is not to impress. The goal of wisdom is to help the one who is hearing. Look at chapter 4 and verse 14. He's pleading throughout the Proverbs. He says, "Enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not in the way of evil men." Look at chapter 12, verse 22. Talking about just practical things here. "Lying lips are abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight." And so this is something that can help you kids going through Proverbs, that there is within every person, in every child even, the propensity to lie, to cover up your sins. But he says that lying lips are an abomination, okay? So the kids can learn from it. But likewise, people in the workplace can learn from it. That there's so much dishonesty in this world, and people are stealing from their businesses and their boss, and they steal from one another. It's just there's so much a lack of integrity, and yet when we go to work, we can look in the Proverbs, and the same thing that helps a child live with wisdom helps an adult live with wisdom, to realize I need to deal truly. I don't need to lie. I don't need to cover up these things. Let me just be honest. I'm not going to try to oversell something. I'm just going to be honest and deal truly. That is a delight to God. So it's right there. It's on the bottom shelf. It's practical for your life. But if you really want to dive deep and study, I'm telling you, there's a wealth underneath it as well. That you just keep digging away, and you can study and study and study. But thankfully, Proverbs is one of those, there are some books, and they're all rich. Every book of the Bible is rich, and some of them take a lot more work than others to mine out those riches that you gotta dig and you gotta blast, and you've got to form a mine shaft to find the nuggets of gold that are in there. Not so with the book of Proverbs. It's like you enter this field where there's just gold all over, and you can just reach down and grab it, and it's there for the taking. And that's why the book of Proverbs is so good as a supplement to whatever you're reading in the Bible, wherever your devotions are. Just go through the Proverbs. Read a proverb a day. Read a chapter in Proverbs every single day, and you will gain wisdom, and you'll walk away from it every single time with something new. But there's some of the book is just scattered thoughts and proverbs. But towards the beginning, there is a theme, there is a context that develops, and there's some similar words. Look back at chapter 2. Read a few of these verses here, and I want you to notice how many times words like the way or the path are mentioned in some of these verses. Chapter 2, verse 6. For the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. He layeth up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler to them that walk uprightly. He keepeth the paths of judgment, and preserveth the way of his saints. Then shalt thou understand righteousness and judgment and equity, yea, every good path. When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee, to deliver thee from the way of the evil man, from the man that speaketh forward things, who leave the paths of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice to do evil, and delight in the frowardness of the wicked, whose ways are crooked, and they froward in their paths, to deliver thee from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flattereth with her words, which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forgetteth the covenant of her God, for her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead. None that go unto her return again, neither take they hold of the paths of life, that thou mayest walk in the way of good men and keep the paths of righteousness. And those aren't the only ones, okay? Chapter 3, the theme continues, and chapter 4, verse 11. It says, I have taught thee in the way of wisdom. I have led thee in right paths. Verse 14. Enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not in the way of evil men. Avoid it, pass not by it, turn from it, and pass away. Verse 18. Okay, I'm just laying out for you that there's a theme here. Okay, you're getting the context. Verse 18, but the path of the just is as the shining light, that shineth more and more into the perfect day. The way of the wicked is as darkness. They know not at what they stumble. And so over and over again, he uses the words way and path. And quickly we understand that there's really in life just two ways. There is the way of wisdom, and there is the way of foolishness. And everything that we do, every decision that we make, every action that we take is either moving us forward on the way of wisdom or in the way of foolishness. That's it. Jesus would call it the narrow way and the broad way. David in the Psalms talks about the way of the law. Blessed is the man that walketh in the way of the Lord. There is a way that is right and wise and good and narrow, and then there is our own way, the way of foolishness. Proverbs is about getting us to the way of wisdom. There is a way to walk in this life that is wise. And there are, the book of Proverbs, as you move forward and you get into all of these random, I say random, but they're placed there by inspiration of God on almost every topic imaginable. They deal with your work ethic, they deal with your language, they deal with your relationships and your spouse and adultery and children, everything in life is pretty much dealt with in Proverbs, because what he's showing is no matter what you're doing, there's a way to do it wisely and there's a way to do it foolishly. And we want to be on the way of wisdom. Another fascinating way to study the book of Proverbs is to look into some of the special categories or types of people that pop up repeatedly throughout the book. Have you ever taken like maybe a personality profile before? And there are different ways to categorize those things, but some people would say, oh, I'm phlegmatic, or I'm melancholy, or I'm sanguine. You know, there are those different personalities where you might find some characteristics. Last year we talked about the spiritual gifts, right? And that kind of has that feel to it. We even took a test and said, you know, what might be some of your spiritual gifts that God has given for you to use? And we found that along with the spiritual gifts, it often comes baked into a certain type of personality. And there are certain character traits that go along with each one, that if you have the gift of, say, prophecy, you're somebody that has no problem just speaking your mind and just telling it the way that it is, whereas other people might pull their punches, you don't. Okay, that's possibly the gift of prophecy. The gift of, mercy is somebody that you feel other people's pain. You know when they're hurting, and you know how to be there for them when they need somebody, rather than saying, oh, you need to learn a lesson from this, or you need to just get over that. No, a person with mercy doesn't think in terms of that. They think in terms of how can I be there for this person in their pain. So there are those characteristics that go along with it. In Proverbs, we find another helpful list, how we can be categorized, and basically every person falls into one of four categories that are described throughout the book of Proverbs. And I wanted to take some time tonight to look at some scriptures in Proverbs and help us identify where we are. It's good for us to know, especially if you're going to be in Proverbs, to say, you know what, that's kind of me. I might be kind of labeled this way in the book of Proverbs, and that may help me to grow. So the first one that we find in Proverbs is the simple. The simple. Look back in chapter 1, verse 4. So this is one of the objectives of the whole book of Proverbs. It says to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. So the simple person isn't necessarily unintelligent, not at all, but it would carry the idea of being naive. Okay, he talks there about knowledge to the young man, knowledge and discretion. That's one thing that comes oftentimes with youth, is just kind of naivete and a simplicity toward life. It takes time, it takes instruction to learn of the subtleties of life. The simple person is usually very pliable. They take on the characteristics of whoever they're around. All right, if they're with a group of people from church, I mean, they're straight-laced, and they talk right, and they do right, and everything's good, and they excel in that environment. When they're in a bubble of spirituality and good friends and people around them, they do well. But then you get them outside of that environment, they're not stable or rooted enough to really stand on their own, and you get them around the wrong kinds of people, and that's what they take on. That's what they become. And we all are subject to the influence of friends, but some people more than others. And so this is the simple one. They follow the crowd, and some people stay simple. Everybody starts off simple. We were all kids. We were all young and naive. Some of us still are. But the goal is not to stay there, okay? Verse 22. He asks, how long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity? And the scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. So those who are simple, they get drawn into sin because they don't think through the consequences of it. They're not thinking ahead. They just leap in, they do stuff, and they don't want to walk on that wrong path, but they're not thinking about it, and so they just wander into it. Maybe somebody that gets drawn into false doctrine, and not because they're stupid or not because they don't understand these things, but because they're not thinking. They don't think through who they're around, and they don't have subtlety to them. Look at chapter 22. Proverbs 22:3, it says, "A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished." A prudent, a wise person says, no, that's not a good path. I see where that's heading, and I don't want any part of it. The simple one doesn't even think about it, just leaps right in, and it says, and they're punished for it. They get into all kinds of trouble because they just didn't think it through. A simple person tends to be deceived fairly easily. It's something that they can be what we would call gullible. Okay, they believe whatever they hear, and they might come to church, come to a good church, and they hear truth, and they're like, oh yeah, that's really good, that's right, that's what I'm going to do. And then they go over and they hear some false counsel, or they turn on the TV and they hear some false doctrine, and they say, oh, that's really good, I'm going to go do that. So there's a lack of discernment there to where there's no red flags that come up. There's nothing that says, warning, this is wrong, this is error. No, there is no, they don't consider error at all. It's just kind of, I'm just moving forward and kind of floating through life here. Look at chapter 14. And like I say, there's nothing wrong with starting out simple, but you don't want to stay there. Chapter 14, verse 15. It says, "The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going." A prudent man knows where he's headed, knows what is right, knows the path that he's supposed to walk in, and the simple is just listening to any influence that comes into their life. Look at chapter 19. So there's hope for the simple. There is hope. You don't have to stay simple. They can learn if they are surrounded by good influences. That helps them thrive. That helps a simple person to learn wisdom. But also there's a maybe negative way that a simple person can learn wisdom, and that is by seeing firsthand where that bad path of foolishness leads. Look at chapter 19 and verse 25. It says, "Smite a scorner, and the simple will beware, and reprove one that hath understanding, and he will understand knowledge." So when a simple person is maybe drawn or lured into the wrong type of person or crowd, when they see somebody fall flat on their face, they see the consequences of sin come into that person's life, they say, whoa, I don't want that at all. I'm going the other direction now. They can beware because of it. Look at chapter 21, similar thought here, verse 11. "When the scorner is punished, the simple is made wise. And when the wise is instructed, he receiveth knowledge." So, simple. It might be where you're at, and there's no shame in that, other than if you're kind of in limbo, if you kind of see yourself as somebody who can be pulled in multiple directions, you need to get some roots put down where you belong and not stay there. How long will ye love simplicity? Don't love simplicity. Get over where you're supposed to be on the right path and settle yourself there. The second type of person that we read about, and we've already read a few verses, but the second one is the fool. There is a fool. Now, we know that that's pretty much opposite of the wise. Okay, that's not a good place to be in. The fool is not somebody who's so young they're just naive about everything. The fool is not naive at all. They are making a deliberate choice to go in the wrong way. They are not deceived. They are choosing their path. Look at chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 7, it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." they don't want anything to do with it. They despise it. They look down on it. It doesn't interest them. They just know, I know where I'm going, and I don't really care what people say about it. Chapter 15, verse 5. A fool despiseth his father's instruction, but he that regardeth reproof is prudent. So the foolishness and being a fool, being on that path of foolishness rather than wisdom, that's not something that we have to learn. Now you can learn it if you find yourself in the spot of the simple, that if you're hanging around with fools, you're going to become a fool. Okay, that's just what it's going to be like. But you don't have to learn it from anybody. You know why? Because it's in us. Without any intervention, we all tend toward the path of foolishness. That's just what is built within the sinful human nature. Look at chapter 22. Verse 15, it says, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. That's why, as parents, we have such an important obligation to correct our children when we see them tending towards foolishness, because the fact of the matter is you don't want your child to be a fool. You don't want them to go through life with that kind of pain that's associated with it. Again, being a fool does not mean unintelligent. There are some of the most brilliant minds in the world are fools. And it's sad to say, but they just are. You know, the book of Psalms says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And you look at some of the intellectual atheists that are out there in the world, and they're smart and they know what they're talking about, but when it comes to eternal spiritual matters, they're fools. They're off of the path of wisdom. They are going with that inbred, that inbound foolishness that is within them. Pastor that I sometimes read after as a commentator. His name is Bob Deffenbaugh, and he wrote this: If the origin of wisdom is humility and fear of the Lord, folly is rooted in a deep-seated hostility toward God and toward those in authority. The fool takes pleasure in evil and flaunts his folly. Takes pleasure in evil, flaunts his folly. Look at chapter 13. Verse 16. It says, every prudent man dealeth with knowledge, but a fool layeth open his folly. He's proud of it. It's not that he stumbled into it because he was too naive to know what he was doing. He knew it, and he's delighting in it. He just loves to walk in that path, and it has a hostility, as he says, toward God and towards authority. And so this would indicate that somebody who has a problem with authority and a disdain for those who try to bring instruction, who perhaps bring rebuke, who try to correct them, they are showing the symptoms of a fool. Look at chapter 17. Chapter 17, verse 10. It says, a reproof, you know what a reproof is, right? If I got to pull you aside and I say, Cameron, I need to talk to you about your behavior this morning, son, you know, which you were fine. But if I need to talk to him, I'm giving him a reproof, okay? A reproof, he says, entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into a fool. He's just not going to take it. Not going to take that kind of correction and reproof. Look at chapter 23 and verse 9. He says, speak not in the ears of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of thy words. Have you ever met a fool in your life? And you loved them, and you cared about them, and you wanted to help them with something, give them some advice or some counsel, and they just rebuffed you. They did not want anything to do with what you had to say. They were bound and determined to go their own way. The fool is an arrogant, prideful person. An arrogant person. He or she will not learn from others and will not even learn from their own mistakes. Look at chapter 14. You get in the picture? You don't want to be a fool. This is not the way that God wants any of His children to be. Proverbs 14:3, in the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them. Verse 16, a wise man feareth and departeth from evil, but the fool rageth and is confident. Back to chapter 12, verse 15. 12:15, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. They don't need counsel. They don't need anybody to help them on their way. They just know my way's right in my own eyes, and that's all I care about. Okay? That is the arrogancy of the fool. The fool is on the path of foolishness by their own choice. They cannot, they will not be told anything different. And so their life, the life of a fool, will be one of pain. It will be one of pain for themselves and for anyone who is near them. Look at chapter 9, verse 6. Some of these verses will overlap a little bit, but chapter 9, verse 6, it says, forsake the foolish and live, and go in the way of understanding. So the idea is you don't want to be around the foolish person because they will bring pain to anyone who is near them. Chapter 17, verse 21. He that begetteth a fool doeth it to his sorrow, and the father of a fool hath no joy. Verse 25 says, a foolish son is a grief to his father, and bitterness to her that bare him. These are the heartbreakers. Okay? They are going to go their own way, and they will break your heart in the process. And it's a shame. It's sad. These are the prodigal sons. You know, that you do everything that you can to love on them and to do what is right by them, and they are just bound and determined, I'm going to do this my way. And at the end of that path, it hurts because you know they're going to be in for some serious, serious pain. Now the hope and the prayer for the fool is that through that pain, they will abandon their folly. Sometimes, you get a prideful person like a King Nebuchadnezzar who says, I have done all this. And God humbles them through pain, through circumstances, through life, puts them through the ringer. Really, they do it to themselves. But the hope is that they come out the other side acknowledging the God of heaven and saying, He is the God. Look at chapter 19, verse 29. It says, judgments are prepared for scorners, and stripes for the back of fools. That goes with that idea. They're in for trouble. Okay? There's stripes in their future. There's pain in their future. Chapter 26, verse 11. As a dog returneth to his vomit. That's a great one of those images, As a dog, you ever seen a dog do that, by the way? Oh, it's nasty. They return to their vomit. It says, so a fool returneth to his folly. You can't teach them anything better. They might know it's nasty, they might know it's disgusting and the wrong way, but they continue to go back after it. Chapter 17, verse 10. Again, a reproof entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into a fool. But hopefully, maybe, after 100 stripes across the fool's back, and just pounded and pounded and pounded by life, maybe, hopefully, the fool wakes up and says, I'm sick of this pain. I need to change some things. I need to learn the way of the wise and get back on track. That's the hope. That's the prayer. Thirdly, there is the scorner. So has this brought up anybody in your mind? I don't want you to tell me who it is, but as you're thinking through, the goal here is, as you're hearing the descriptions, that you are picturing in your mind a person. If you can personify it, then you can say, yep, that's right. That's where that kind of life leads. You know somebody who tends to be more simple in their life, that they are just unstable one way one day, one way another day. You know, do you know somebody who's like a fool and they're just bound and determined to beat their head into the wall? Well, thirdly, there's the scorner. And sometimes it can be hard to tell a little bit who's a fool and who is a scorner, but it's pretty clear that the scorner is actually in a worse condition than even the fool is in. Because not only has the scorner chosen the way of foolishness, but he finds it necessary to openly oppose the way of wisdom, to scorn anyone who would walk the way of wisdom. The scorner is so proud that he will not be corrected either by rebuke or by the pain of chastening. They just won't won't change their way. Look at chapter 21, verse 24. Proud and haughty scorner is his name, who dealeth in proud wrath. There's just a lot of pride wrapped up in there. Chapter 15, verse 12. A scorner loveth not one that reproveth him, neither will he go unto the wise. I said at the beginning, there are certain people that you ought to rub shoulders with, that you ought to sit down and try to absorb some of their wisdom. The scorner has no time for such things, no desire to go to the wise. And even if the wise comes to him and says, hey, you are out of line, you are on the path to destruction, you need to get some things straight, they will not say, well, thank you for caring enough about me to point that out. No, the scorner is ready to fight, okay? Don't you talk to me. You mind your own business. Look at chapter 13, verse 1. A wise son heareth his father's instruction. You hearing this, kids? A wise son, a wise child will hear his father's instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. They just tune it out. I don't need this at all. Chapter 9, verse 7. He that reproveth a scorner. So here's the wise person, the friend, the parent, somebody who's trying to help them. He that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame. And he that rebuketh a wicked man getteth himself a blot. Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. There's quite the contrast between those two people. And you want somebody to hate your guts? All right, rebuke them when they are proud and haughty in their own spirit, in their own way. Here's the sad truth. Apart from miraculous intervention from God, the scorner is beyond hope of correction. Okay? As far as man is concerned, humanity sometimes, if there's a thief, a criminal, somebody who's a fool, sometimes that correction, that disciplinary action, that punitive judgment will change their ways. Not so a scorner. A scorner is set in their ways, and there is nothing but the hand of God that can relieve that from them. So look at chapter 19, verse 25. So the scorner still needs to be punished, though, for their misdeeds. And the silver lining in their punishment is not that they will be corrected by it, but that somebody else might be. That somebody else can see where that life has led them. This brings us back to the simple. So 1925, smite a scorner. Smite a scorner. And the simple will beware, and reprove one that hath understanding, and he will understand knowledge. Again, chapter 21:11 says, when the scorner is punished, it doesn't say he shall be made wise. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't change him. It doesn't correct his way. When a scorner is punished, the simple is made wise. Scorners are incredibly negative influences wherever they are. They drag people down. They are negative. They are against everything that is good and wise. And so the best course of action, unfortunately, is often to just avoid them, or if possible, to remove them. To remove them out of your life. Look at chapter 19, verse 25. No, I'm sorry, chapter 24. I was looking on the wrong line there. Chapter 24 and verse 9. The thought of foolishness is sin, and the scorner is an abomination to men. That's a bad influence right there. An abomination. Look at chapter 22 in verse 10. Cast out the scorner, and contention shall go out. Yea, strife and reproach shall cease. I remember seeing this sometimes in the Christian school where I worked in Florida, that there were times that some of the students in the school, they would be qualified as the scorner. Okay? Not every Christian school is just a bastion of good influences, okay? It doesn't work that way. Everybody's a sinner. And sometimes a scorner will be in the mix of that. And there'll be church kids even, but a scorner and a bad influence. And time after time, they are chastened and they are punished for their actions, but nothing ever changes. And they are just as proud and haughty as ever. And eventually, the way to get them to stop stirring up so much trouble is just to cast them out. And when they are removed and they are expelled from the school, it's amazing how everything just kind of settles back down. One person stirred up all that stuff. I've seen it happen in churches before, where one scorner just about can rip a church apart. If you got scorners in your life, boy, it's hard. If they're family, you want to love them. But be careful, because if you say something to them, they'll hate your guts for it, okay? And sometimes if you just got, like, say, Facebook friends, and they're just always stirring up trouble, and they're always just mocking and scorning and ridiculing everything, I'm telling you, you want to get rid of contention and strife? Just cast that influence out of your life, okay? There are some people, some friends, some influences, they're just not worth keeping around. They will drag you down forever. And those people need to be just cut out, and you just deliver them to God and say, God, I hope you'll work in their life, but I certainly can't work in their life, and they're dragging me down. That's a scorner. Boy, don't get caught up in that. That is pretty far gone down the path of foolishness. Fourthly, this is where we want to be, the wise. Be a wise person. The whole book of Proverbs is about this, so we can't exhaust it. There's too many qualities about the wise person to really dive into. But suffice it to say, a couple of points. It starts with the fear of God. Look at chapter 2. I said before, some people can be very smart and still fools, and that's because they have no fear of God. But when you start with the fear of God, you can become wise with or without the education of man. You can become a wise person. You ever known somebody, maybe somebody from an older generation, they may have never even got past the 8th grade, but when it came to common sense and wisdom for life, they were full of wisdom. Okay? That's what we're talking about here. The fear of God is wisdom, not education. Chapter 2, verse 6, For the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. Chapter 9, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. So you just focus on getting to know God and obeying God, and I'm telling you, you feast upon his word, and if you never attended another class or read another book or educated yourself in any way, you may not get smarter, but you will get wiser. You will be able to live the life of the wise. And a wise person, you notice that the common trait with like fools and scorners is they're proud, right? This is my way. This is my life. Nobody's going to tell me what I'm going to do. A wise person is humble before God and before other people. When somebody else comes to them, a wise man is willing to hear instruction. A wise man is willing to be rebuked. I don't love being confronted about my ways, but in another way, I do. Because I know that it's good for me to be corrected. It is good for me to be challenged. A wise man will learn from his own mistakes. Being wise doesn't mean you'll never make a mistake. It just means you'll learn from it, whereas the fool doesn't. Look at chapter 11. Let's look at a couple of verses here. Verse 2. When pride cometh, then cometh shame. But with the lowly, or the humble, is wisdom. Read chapter 9 and verse 8. Reprove not a scorner lest he hate thee. And then it says this, rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. So this is one of the main criteria to, if I were to ask, we would all say, this is where I want to be. I want to be wise, right? I want to be categorized as a wise person walking in the way of wisdom. Let me ask you this. How do you handle it when somebody rebukes you? Because that's a good indicator of whether you are on the way of the wise or not, whether you are humble enough to receive instruction. Now, sometimes when people rebuke you, they don't do it in the right spirit, right? It doesn't always come in the right way. But within every criticism, within every rebuke, you should be willing to take it and to look at it and say, what is true here? Maybe there is something that I need to change in my life. And you need to be willing to receive that. Chapter 10, verse 8, it says, the wise in heart will receive commandments. Commandments. But a prating fool shall fall. When the Word of God gives you a commandment, do you stiffen up and say, I'm not doing that? Or when some authority in your life, your parent, or your pastor, or somebody, comes and says, hey, could you do this for me? And they give you a commandment, give you something to do. Can you receive that? Can you just say, you know what, I'm just going to obey, I'm just going to submit to this? That's the way of the wise. Look at chapter 15, verse 31. The ear that heareth the reproof of life abideth among the wise. Chapter 19. I told you we're going to look at a lot of verses tonight. Yeah. If you want this list, if you want these notes, I will email them to you, okay? Chapter 19, verse 20 says, hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou mayest be wise in thy latter end. Chapter 21, verse 22. A wise man scaleth the city of the mighty, and casteth down the strength of the confidence thereof. That wasn't even the verse I wanted, but it was about a wise man. Verse 11. When the scorner is punished, the simple is made wise, and when the wise is instructed, he receiveth knowledge. So when you make a mistake and you get punished for your mistake, do you learn from it? Are you corrected? Does it help you in life? Okay? Those who are wise also, not just humble and willing to learn, but those who are wise are very careful with their words. There's a theme that will come up again and again throughout Proverbs, that a wise person is very careful with what they say. Let's look at a few verses of this. Chapter 10, verse 19. In the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise. Okay, so think Peter. Always had something to say about everything. And his mouth was always going. And he often got himself into trouble and said things he shouldn't have said and put his foot in his mouth time and time again. Okay? If you just have a multitude of words and you just talk and talk and talk and never think through what you're going to say, you will sin with your words. Okay? It's going to happen. A wise person speaks less, refraineth their lips. You ever notice this about people that exude a wisdom about them, that oftentimes they're very quiet people, and then when they speak, it's like this hush falls, and everybody says, I need to hear what this person is about to say, okay? Because they don't speak a lot, but when they choose to speak, you know it's going to be good. You know it's going to be right. They're careful with the words. Look at verse 32 of chapter 10. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked speaketh forwardness. Chapter 12, verse 18. There is that speaketh like the piercings of a sword. You ever had somebody talk like that to you? It just cut and it pierced and it hurt, not in a good way, but in a way that was intended just to cause pain. And it says, but the tongue of the wise is health. It's something that brings healing. It's something that helps you. Even if it hurts, it's with the intention of helping. Chapter 14, verse 3, and the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them. Look at 15:2. Chapter 15:2. The tongue of the wise useth knowledge aright, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. It's almost like there's no stop on it. There's no way to stop. It just keeps pouring out, and what it pours out is always foolishness. But the person that is wise, they are going to use their words, their knowledge aright. Now, think about it this way. In this world of connectivity and texting and email and social media and all of those things, those are simply an extension of our words, of our tongue. Not everything we say is said with our lips. Sometimes we type those things out. And people seem to be bolder and say more when it's just behind a screen than it is face-to-face with somebody. But you need to recognize that those are still your words. You are still accountable for them. And don't you know people that once they get online, they are just pouring out foolishness everywhere they go? That ought not be us. If you are utilizing those platforms, go for it, but be wise about it. Communicate that which is helpful and is good, and not just ranting and spilling your foolishness on every little thing. Okay? I know everybody has an opinion on everything, but we don't always have to hear it, right? So be careful with their words. And then those who are wise are careful to listen and learn. That's why they're not speaking a lot. Because they're busy listening. They're busy listening and learning from other people. Look at chapter 18 and verse 15. The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. I mean, it's seeking, it's listening. Chapter 23, verse 19. Hear thou, my son, and be wise, and guide thine heart in the way. I want to walk in the way of wisdom. Then close your mouth and open your ears and hear, and be wise, and guide thine heart in the way. The basic goal of the book of Proverbs is that we would gain wisdom and then act according to that wisdom. The way of wisdom teaches us, part of it is to teach us how to think correctly, to view life correctly, to view the world, everything, to think correctly, but also how to live correctly. Wisdom is not just knowledge. Wisdom is putting godly knowledge into action in our lives and actually living according to it. It is a practical thing. It is an action thing. You can't just know wisdom. You have to live wisdom. Wisdom it encompasses our entire life. Well, how do I get wisdom? Well, we've talked a little bit about it. 3 basic ways. I'm not going to elaborate on them. 3 ways to get wisdom. Number 1, pray for it. That's what Solomon did. He said, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing half the time. Would you give me an understanding? Would you give me wisdom? And God answered his prayer. The book of James, it says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, which giveth to all men freely and upbraideth not. Okay, so that's James 1:5. Pray for it. Secondly, search for it. Search for wisdom. It's something that you need to be on the lookout for. As you're going about your day in life, as you see family members and you see them stumbling and struggling, learn from their mistakes. As you look over here and you see somebody who is successful and they're not successful because they're like all oily and greasy, you know, they've gotten it on the backs of other people. They're doing it right and they seem to be people of integrity. Learn wisdom there. Be on the lookout. Search for it. Get in this book and search for it as for hid treasures. Proverbs chapter 2 says, search as for hid treasures. Search for it. And then learn wisdom from painful experiences. Okay? You know this as the school of hard knocks. That sometimes we make mistakes. And I don't want that path the most, but if we can learn from our errors, that too is wisdom. That too is wisdom. And so in those ways, we need to seek it, we need to walk it, we need to live it, to be in the way of wisdom. And so I'm telling you, if you lack wisdom, get in the book of Proverbs. We probably looked at 100 verses tonight, didn't we? We've just scratched the surface. We've just scratched the surface of the wisdom that's available just in this one book. I'm telling you, encourage you, be in it every day. And it'll help you to walk in the way of wisdom. That's what we want. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word and for